there. Welcome to the Pelvis Project podcast. I'm Megan.
And I'm Roxy. We're two pelvic health experts brought together by passion for our careers, entrepreneurship, motherhood, and the desire for intentional relationships.
Join us in our mission to spread pelvic floor awareness and start conversations surrounding the truth behind genuine health, imperfect wellness, and joyfully navigating life. We are so glad you are here with us.
Let's start the conversation.
Hey, Roxy.
Hey, Megan.
We're coming at you on a Monday during the day at 1:52 p.m., which is better for us. We normally are doing this at like 9 o'clock at night. So everybody hold on tight because
We might be feisty today.
we're a better version of ourselves. Okay, well, we're going to jump on into it. We are going to have an episode today on kind of more than just a period and kind of what every parent should know about their teen's menstrual health and some questions you could be asking, things you could be communicating. And, it's really kind of this thought of our teenagers often know like their school schedule or like their sports schedule or different things like that. And they really have no idea when their last period was. And so if you say something like, when's your last period? And they're like, I have no idea. Then we're missing an opportunity for some really good education on how to teach them how to properly track. And we're going to, hopefully, after you listen to this, you're going to be like, oh, okay, I understand a little bit better of the importance and what an opportunity we have to plant the seed to start changing the conversation around our menstrual health. And now we're not going to be, so hopefully Roxy and I right now have women coming in that are our age or older, have no idea about their menstrual health, none. And the goal is that we could start having that stop, that girls will start coming in and know everything about their cycle.
Yeah, I think that we're seeing a shift of where it used to be very unknown, women disconnected from their cycles. We know now that our menstrual cycle is one of our vital signs. And so it used to be this inconvenience, this like unknown thing, where now I think women are learning so much more and we have a lot more to learn just in general. But I think that we're starting to realize the beauty of the cycle. And it's not just taboo and embarrassing and shameful. It also, I think we know more about how it's supposed to feel rather than just we have to live with things. And so anyway, we're starting to see a little bit of a shift. We want to see more, though, where the full grasp of what this womanly process is understood and appreciated and used for our benefit rather than just this annoying week of the month that everyone dreads and avoids and knows little about.
Right. So our menstrual cycle can tell us about hormones, nutrition, stress, energy availability, pelvic health, future fertility, overall wellness. And so that's why it's important to start the conversation early, because this can be a really good insight into the health of your teen and obviously the health of yourself as a mother. But we really want to make this episode more about teens. And so it's often like we just don't think about this stuff just because they're quote unquote kids, but it can be really helpful. So we can start with, let's just kick it off with why tracking matters. Do you want to go into that, Roxy?
So you think about all the things in life that we track. I mean, I don't know how many times I talk about my kids' poop consistency, honestly, with the daycare or whatever, right? So there's like all these things we track, our sleep and our steps and our workouts and all these other things. But we're not really tracking menstrual cycles as an average person, woman. The menstrual cycle isn't tracked well. And so since it's considered the vital sign, why would that be? You think about if we have a fever, then we know that there's something going wrong. So if our cycle is not consistent, if it's not pretty predictable month to month, some things that we then can start looking for, we can start being curious about, that it helps us identify our irregular cycles. Obviously, that's like what we're going to be tracking. Is it regular? Is it not? Heavy bleeding, and what does that even mean, right? And then if we're tracking it, we can see trends here. Any skipped ovulation in a younger girl, that might not be a big concern, but when that girl in 10 years or 15 years is trying to have a baby, That's a big deal. And so we're going to teach these girls to start watching for this earlier. Possible PCOS, red S, which we were going to see a lot in these really active young women, thyroid dysfunction, endometriosis, chronic stress, pregnancy risks, medication side effects. There's just the list can go on and on and on. But it's where we need to start is just by tracking. We don't have to identify those things right away, but we don't know to identify them if we don't see a problem. And that's where we want to get these girls conditioned to be watching and curious about their body, even if they don't understand it. And so right now it's super easy. There's so many different options of how to track. You can use your phone. There's lots of apps that are free. There's really bougie ones, and then there's really basic ones. You can start looking at different apps that would be appropriate to track that. A paper calendar works just great, right? You can be monitoring just different symptoms when the cycle starts, when you notice different changes in attitude and energy and pain, things like that. And then even just like a planner, like it doesn't really matter, but just know that there's not a perfect way to do it. The way that one person tracks their life or their calendar looks different than the next person and so on. And this is just the exact same. We just have to do it, right? And so parents don't necessarily need to monitor it. We really want to empower our girls, our teens to know their own bodies, not for the mom to micromanage them in this process. And so that's where be creative and try things. How does maybe what works for you as the mom or the dad doesn't work for the daughter? And so we have to, I think just starting tracking something is a good start.
Yes, absolutely. And just one thing to touch on with that, Roxy referred to REDS, and that is relative energy deficiency in sport. And I just wanted to touch on that because I do think that that's something that female athlete parents need to be aware of. And it's a condition of energy deficiency causing an adverse effect on all bodily systems. So it can affect both male and female athletes, but it's just something that we do see happen. Common signs and complications with that include performance drops, bone health, hormonal imbalance, physical and physiological effects. And so one of those things is somebody just completely loses their period, their cycle, in females. And so that is something that if your teen is playing a high level competitive sport and you're not monitoring how much fuel are they getting in their bodies, are they eating enough? Are they sleeping enough? Are they drinking enough? Like all that kind of stuff. We don't really think it's not that big of a deal. And it's easy for us to say like, oh, they're teens and, like yada, yada. But then if we're not asking or tracking their cycles, and then lo and behold, they haven't had a period for months and months on end, we're talking this can affect their future health, their bone health. They're going to start to have injuries. They're going to have fractures. And this isn't to cause any sort of fear, but it's the truth about our health that we just continually are overlooking. And I feel like now we kind of have a whole episode on that because I get all fired up about it. We got to kind of get out of this like kids are resilient and like it's normal because they are, and there is common things, but we're just going to set them up for failure later in life if we're not paying attention. So anyway, questions every parent should be asking. Like Roxy mentioned, we don't want to micromanage. This shouldn't be an interrogation. In fact, I have a teen daughter. I'd really suggest having like a very like lovely, like just like check-in conversation, share about your cycle, like make it just kind of your normal, it's not odd at all. And really trying to help her know. It's interesting to me. I hear some people say that their kids don't like to talk to them about it at all. And then others that have no issue with it. So yeah, I mean, obviously, depending on your situation, you will have to navigate that in whatever you feel like is appropriately as for you and your child. But just make it like normal conversation. So here's some questions that we have that you could be asking. When was your last period? If they don't know, teach them how to track. If you don't know how to track, schedule an appointment with us, okay?
That's like the low-hanging fruit. Just
Low hanging
what
fruit.
day does your cycle start? Like what
Yes.
date of the month?
Put a
Circle it with a red. Yeah.
star on the calendar. That's all you have to start with. Okay. So, next question would be about how many days are between your periods. So, if day one is the day you start your period, and then that goes until you start your period again as day one. So approximately 21 to 45 days in the first few years of starting your period is kind of what we see happen, because it's not going to be like clockwork in those first 2 years. There's going to be some, like, again, my daughter, it's not every 28 days. There's some where it has been exactly 30 days, and then we might have one that's 45 days, but we're tracking it because guess what? It always gets a little wonky when she's in sport. And you know what's happening in sport? She needs more fuel, and it is really fascinating to watch. It's not that it goes away, but it becomes longer in between. And then often she goes into having a long weekend or a break, and guess what happens? Her body comes down and she has her period. So anyway, 21 to 45 days is kind of that, like, we're watching it and seeing what's happening. So how many days do you bleed? So that's typically anywhere from 2 to 7 days. So when someone says, how long was your cycle? That doesn't mean 3 days because I bled 3 days. That means your cycle length was from day one all the way down until like that day before you start your period again. So let's say that was 36 days. And then on the 37th day, you started your period. That's day one. So your cycle length was 36 days. How long did you bleed, or how long was your period, is that 2 to 7 days. So how heavy, you can ask, how heavy was it? So you're going to ask, because if you say how heavy was it and you don't give specifics, I don't know. They don't have anything to put it up against, like to compare it to. So you're asking things like, how many pads are you using? How many tampons? Did you bleed through your clothes? How are you bleeding through your pad overnight? When my daughter first started, like, we had to get the nighttime pad. She was bleeding through them. It was very heavy. So I kept that. I watched that. I'm like, this isn't going to be a good thing if this is happening every single month. And it doesn't anymore, but we watched it. But we need to be asking those questions because they don't even know. They're like, this is just how it is. I mean, it's the same thing with adults coming in and they have painful sex and they're like, oh, I just thought that this is how it was supposed to be, because they don't have anything to compare it to. No one's talked about it. Red flags is, are you changing your pad or tampon hourly? Are you having large clots? Are you missing school because of your period? Do you have pain? That's another question. So we're not asking, do periods hurt? Instead, we're asking, how much pain? Give them a 0 to 10 scale. Can you function? Do you need medication? Are you missing your sport? Do you see them curling up in bed? Pain that interrupts their life deserves an evaluation. So if they are having to miss school because these are so bad, a conversation needs to be started, which then is a whole nother thing, because we really, right now in this day and age, you start having a conversation with a provider and they just want to go to birth control. That's never the first answer, in my opinion. Sometimes it's a useful tool, but I do not love that for young adults. Do you ever feel dizzy? So this could suggest things like anemia, heavy bleeding, poor fueling. Are you skipping meals? This is a great transition into discussing energy, like availability with them, and seeing, like, I mean, if they're skipping meals, how's your energy? Are they tired all the time? Those sorts of things. Do you feel exhausted around your cycle? So that could be iron, nutrition, sleep. Have your periods changed? So change matters. So that's a simple one. You know, are they heavy and then now they're not, or they weren't and now they are? Here's one you should ask your daughter. Do you have any leaking when you laugh, run, or jump? So normalize asking about bladder health. And I think you would be shocked how many teens leak urine. It is actually more common than we think. So we need to be asking our child about that. And then, is there any constipation? Like Roxy asked, when they're little kids, we're watching their poop and seeing it. But then when they get old enough, we're not going in and being like, tell me when you have a poop. Like, we're not going in there. So many teens think that bowel habits have nothing to do with their periods. And it very much can. If your pelvic floor is overactive, that can lead to constipation. If there's just different aspects that we need to be kind of like remembering how how everything sits in the pelvis. Do you have pain putting in a tampon? This is a huge conversation. So not every teen uses tampons, but if they do, we need to be asking, does it hurt? Can you insert it? Does it only hurt coming out? Because pain is not normal. And this could indicate pelvic floor tension. It could indicate some hymenal concerns. vaginismus, vulvar concerns. But if we're not asking, they're not just going to naturally, not every kid is going to be giving us this information. Some will, some won't. Can you feel your tampon? So you shouldn't feel your tampon when it's in. It should just be in. So if that's yes, it could be things like the wrong size of tampon or incorrect placement or pelvic floor tension. These are all things we don't think to ask them because it's just everyday. It's like normal for us as adults. So does removing it hurt? This could mean things like maybe it's just not saturated enough. Maybe it could be pelvic floor overactivity. It could be muscle guarding. Have you ever fainted with your period? This could be a dysautonomia. It could be severe pain. It could be anemia. It could be a vasovagal response. Again, we would hope that you would know if this happened, but have a conversation. And then, are you afraid of your period? So sometimes fear develops after that first painful cycle that they have, or embarrassment, or they had leaking. And so really asking them those questions, because if you have fear surrounding something that's coming every month, that can lead to some of that pelvic floor tension. If you're having normal conversations, then that fear should start to be eased. Roxy, why don't you take us into some period myths that need to be squashed?
Sure. And I think just before I jump into that, I just think if you're listening to this and that these set of questions feel like so intimidating, like you haven't even gone there with your kid, with your daughter, I think just a simple, like, hey, I heard something about tracking your period. And I haven't done a great job of checking in with you and I really care about you with this. And so I just want to touch base. Like, do you have any questions? Like, you could just start with that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Open the door for it. This might feel like a really mountain of a list of questions to be asking. We aren't trying to get legalistic with things or make you have to do this every single month or whatever it is. But just, I think to open the door, maybe you just even say, I want to care for you in this way. And I know it kind of feels awkward, but I love you and da da da. Like, I just think that
Yeah.
there could be, if you're like, there's no way I could just rattle off that list and my daughter would respond to them. I
Yeah.
think you just open the door and maybe even be patient with it. So anyway, that's kind of my thoughts of just hearing those questions and thinking of the mom who maybe has avoided this conversation or didn't realize that she was supposed to be having it and not feeling like it's such a big undertaking and just starting
Yes.
small. So anyway, there are some myths though. And maybe this is something too that would help you feel more confident starting some of these conversations. But the first myth is that periods should be miserable. And like Megan talked about earlier, um, we only have ourselves to compare with for the most part, or maybe what other people are saying. We don't actually sometimes know what the truth is with this and what it should really be like. So, periods should not be miserable. There's some discomfort around it. There can be cramping, things like that. But no, the myth we need to bust is that periods should be miserable. That it results in you curling up in a ball, missing school, missing sports, work, any of that. So, myth one. Myth two, heavy bleeding is hereditary, so it's fine. And this isn't always the case. I think of this is a myth actually in a lot of realms of pelvic health. I think of like, oh, well, my mom had this, or my mom has this, or my aunts, or the. And sometimes there are trends, but we see more often than not, things like this aren't necessarily always hereditary. And heavy bleeding needs to be looked into. It needs to be an evaluation. Myth number three, birth control is the only answer. While sometimes birth control can be helpful, we have to ask, why are we prescribing birth control? And is that the best first option? There's a lot that we can do in the meantime with that. And I think that sometimes we jump to that because that's what other people are doing, or that's what maybe they did when we were younger a lot more. And I think to be curious about why are we doing this, or even asking the doctor, explain to me the mechanism of this, why, I've heard of this before, but help me understand it better so that you're not just agreeing to this on behalf of your child or yourself, rather saying, tell me why you feel like this is the best answer and help me understand why this is the recommendation that I'm being given right now. And then let's see, myth number four, pain with tampons is normal. That is not the case.
Uh-uh.
Tampon insertion and removal should not be painful. Sometimes, like Megan hinted at, like if it's not saturated or, there's little things here and there. If you don't quite hit it, just right the angle. Like that might not be comfortable, but it shouldn't be painful every single time, all the time. And then myth five here, is that athletes lose their periods because they train hard. And sometimes I know when I was in high school, it was almost that I remember some girls were proud of that, that they were in such good shape. That was kind of the lies that, oh, so and so's in such good shape that she doesn't even have a period anymore. Isn't that so cool? Right. And it's not true. It's actually the opposite, in fact. It's that their body is struggling so much
Uh-huh.
because they have inadequate energy availability and they maybe aren't fueling their body like they should or resting like they should. Megan already hinted at that. But that needs to be evaluated. Like, that's a big red flag there. And then myth number 6, irregular periods are always normal for years. And this is not true. There's some irregularity that is expected right away after a girl starts her period. That's a transition zone. So she went from not having a period to then she will have these cycles regularly for years, hopefully. There's a transition zone there where the body's trying to figure out the rhythm. It's going to overshoot, it's going to undershoot, but it's not going to be probably rhythmic right away, but it should be rhythmic after
Mhm.
a little chunk of time. That persistent irregularity or really long gaps in between periods or any like kind of other concerning symptoms need to be talked about and they need to be evaluated because, again, if the cycle is our vital sign and we're looking at it appropriately, it should give us a lot of information and tell us when we need to be seen and when our body is struggling to do what it's created to do.
Exactly. Those are all so good. Okay, so let's talk about red flags that warrant kind of maybe a medical evaluation or further investigation. So, missed periods for several months, like Roxy just talked about, outside of the expected early cycle variation, and or like obviously like teen pregnancy, something like that. So, bleeding longer than 7 days consistently, if we are bleeding well into a couple of weeks, definitely need to get that looked at. Bleeds through a pad or tampon every hour. That's pretty heavy bleeding. Passes very large clots. Again, that's not something that we see with just a quote unquote like normal cycle. Pain keeping your child from school, pain with tampon insertion, like Roxy just mentioned. I mean, those first few times you're trying to use a tampon, it can be a little bit uncomfortable. But if this is like so painful that they can't do it or they can't figure it out, stuff like that, there are some strategies and education that can be done. Like, for example, putting lube on the end of a tampon will help insert that, especially if there's just some like dryness and uncertainty with, just being able to like glide that in. But there can be, yeah, some simple education and some like showing how the vaginal canal, like the positioning of it, like on an image can be helpful. But otherwise, like if this is just so painful and we're tearful and all the things, then like let's go ahead and have an evaluation done by your doctor. Painful bowel movements during a period, painful urination during a period, severe nausea every cycle, fainting, significant pelvic pain outside of menstruation, worsening symptoms every month. Like all of those things are pretty important to pay attention to and are not normal. And we want to discuss this because it could be things like endometriosis, adenomyosis, PCOS, pelvic floor dysfunction, hormonal disorders, bleeding disorders, nutritional deficiencies. Those are all the things. And again, like this is not to cause any sort of fear. This is to educate so that we can do better. I mean, I have a teen right now. I've had two that I see for endo. And I'm just so glad that we know this and that they're not just living with all this pain and not knowing what's going on. So we are starting to get, hopefully, the tide is turning on that. But again, if you're tracking, you can see things and catch things earlier with PCOS and stuff like that, and then start that education sooner so that we're not digging out of a hole.
Yeah, and I think, as we work with some of the younger gals, we're also working with middle-aged,
Moms,
older
yeah,
women that have the same diagnoses.
yeah,
So if we can get on in front of that early, if we can be educating and empowering these girls on how to manage this and how to have the best quality of life, these are almost life skills for them that they're going to take with them throughout their life because it doesn't just go away once they go to college or, like once they get married or have a baby. Like some of these symptoms, they do have to have good strategies. And why wouldn't we want to, why wouldn't we do whatever we could to set them up for success earlier and try to minimize some of just the pain and struggle and uncertainty that they feel around some of these symptoms. So I think that what we want to do, like Megan said, we in no way want to fearmonger. We don't want to scare tactic anybody into forcing these conversations or questions on their kids. But I think it's time that we really get serious about shifting this conversation. If you aren't establishing yourself as the go-to, your kid's gonna find out trash information possibly from some bimbo on TikTok, probably, right? Like, let's just be real here.
Oh, yeah.
So,
The
I
amount
mean,
of people are, oh, golly. I learned this on TikTok. I'm like, what?
yeah, or from their friend who's navigating it with them. Like,
Yes.
as a mom, you are more of the expert than they are or their friends are. So know that already just by living life. You have experience and you are more of an expert and you want to be the one that's guiding that. And even if you don't know, it's a great time to say, you know what? I don't know. Let's find out together. That's a great question. And so I think instead of just saying, how was school today? Right? Which is a great question to ask. But let's go to the next question and start asking some other things of just like, how are you feeling? Is anything different with your body? How's your cycle? What, how are your cramps this year or not year, sorry, this month? Any questions that do you have any questions about anything? And obviously feels awkward to just shoot them with that right now. But I think really checking in out of love, they're going to feel that. They're going to receive that, even if it's initially met with, stop, or, like a resistance, right? They're navigating this and there's insecurity around this potentially is what that is, not that they don't care. It just is awkward. And who better to confide in than the people that love them the best and help guide them in that? And so it's not to monitor, micromanage, like we said earlier, it's to empower her to understand and trust her body.
Right. And I think with that too, I mean, obviously I'm not a parenting expert, but just sharing from personal experience with this, I would really recommend that you start maybe sharing that, kind of like, hey, you're going to hear things from your friends. And just so you know, bring what you learn from them to me because you trust mom, right? To educate you on what's actually the truth, right? I'm the authority on this basically, and I don't mean that like sometimes I think the word authority gets this like bad rap, but again, kind of like having that like, hey, that like mom's the expert on this because I'm a woman too, or something like that. Like, however you want to say it. But I would really suggest actually starting that conversation sooner than you think. So maybe in like fourth grade, if they haven't started their period yet, because girls are starting to have their period in fourth and fifth grade, and their friends are starting to have that. And so you can just like drop that little seed there. And then again in fifth grade, again, it's like, how's your body been feeling? And of course, you're going to start to notice changes and breast buds and all of that. Like, hey, just remember, let me know if your friends are talking about this stuff so that we can like kind of like make it lighthearted so we can compare notes, stuff like that. So they are really like you're becoming like their gal friend about it almost, and keep that going so that you can try to get into that conversation before it gets weird, before they get into that age where things do get like oh, mom, oh, I don't want to talk about that. Some kids are like that. Some kids aren't. My daughter never really has been. But I don't know if that's because we did just start the conversation really early, which was for what was age appropriate. But I really did in elementary school. I was just like, hey, like, make sure you let me know. Cause she's told me some stuff that she was told in elementary school about her body. And it was so off base. I mean, you guys, it was like, I was like, oh, okay. I'm so glad she told me that. So we could correct it. And now it's just very normal for us to have these conversations. And so, with social media and all that kind of stuff, we are a household that chooses, and my kids don't have that. But it really is wild. We have, like Roxy said, with TikTok and stuff, we have patients coming in that like, that's where they go for their education is TikTok. So if your kids do have social media, which again, that's not what we're talking about here, is not the point, but they have access and then that's what their friends are doing. And so, yeah, it is kind of weird. Like, I don't need to talk to mom about it, but I would just highly suggest starting younger before they even get a hold of social media or anything like that so that it's established that like you're their source of information on this. And even if they hear it on social media, they can still come to you and say like, hey, I saw this. Let's talk about it type of thing. So anyway, that's just my 2 cents on having a teen daughter.
Oh, the joys.
Yes, it's actually I love it. So anyway, quick little takeaways is menstrual cycle is a vital sign. Pain that limits normal activity isn't something to simply accept, even for our teens. Heavy bleeding deserves attention, even for our teens. Tampons should not be painful when inserted correctly, again, even for young individuals. Tracking builds body awareness and helps identify changes early. And open, judgment free conversations create lifelong confidence in reproductive and pelvic health. And also, this is going to make a girl feel more empowered and stronger to have conversations with you about their sexual health. And that is a whole nother conversation that we need to be having. But I would just encourage that if you do feel uncomfortable talking about this stuff with your child, like we can set up education sessions. Roxy, I know can, so can I, where we're helping you learn so that you feel more comfortable having these conversations. And even if you're still uncomfortable, having education sessions with you and your daughter so we can start talking about this more. It is really such a gift. So, again, if you guys ever have any questions, send them to us. We are trying to get better about paying attention to our DMs and social media. Roxy, any last words?
No, I think you said it well.
Okay, very good. All right, until our next episode, we'll keep the conversation going. Thank you so much for joining us this week on the Pelvis Project podcast. Help us continue the conversation by liking and sharing this episode with friends. And if you really want to do us a solid, leave us a review. If you'd like to follow us on social, check out the show notes for links. And remember, this week, take a deep breath and relax your pelvic floor.